Looky, looky, looky. Look who earned a participation medal. Yay! But the best part about this participation medal is the little penguin moves. Look at that little penguin moving. There we go. Anyways, did the Frostbite 10K yesterday. And for some reason, all of these 5Ks and 10Ks, any races now give you a medal at the end. So I've got lots and lots of medals that are now basically going in the trash can. That's what I love about our modern world. You know, the great thing about our modern world is we can all come together to realize that mass consumerism is basically destroying our planet. For every widget that gets created, this is yet more destruction that will come down on the heads of our grandchildren. And with that knowledge, we produce stuff like this, so it essentially can go directly into the landfill. I mean, look at this. Look at it. This is quality. This is quality crap to go into the landfill, right? Again, you sit there and you buy some veggies from Trader Joe's, and they give you plastic, right? That's low grade crap going into the landfill. It's like anybody can throw away plastic wrapping around your produce. But look at this. Look at all the time and energy, money. I mean, this is a this is a real product. That's gonna go straight in the trash can. Anyways, this is why you don't want to be an Aspie. Can I just explain to you why you do not want to be an Aspie? Because other people are like, oh, look at the shiny metal. Yay! I look at the medal and go, wow, I would have been quite fine not getting this medal. Again, especially having done enough of these quote unquote races, I have so many of these medals, they're literally going in the garbage can. And then you look at it, again, it's metal, it's not plastic, it's actually metal, it's enamel, you got all this stuff. Start thinking about the resources and everything that's involved in the producing this thing. And then you realize right now, right? We're going through the climate apocalypse. Asheville, the land of progressivism, is you know, well, we're progressive. We're progressive. Again, it is one of those interesting things in life too. Again, what do you stop doing? Do you stop the actions that are destroying the climate for everybody, or do you stop giving away participation medals so people feel happier about themselves? Well, but Eli, if we stop giving away these medals, people might not feel as happy for themselves. While they're looking at the climate implode. Anyways, don't be an Aspie. Sucks to be an Aspie. Eli, what are you thinking? Don't ask. Do not ask. Do not ask what I'm thinking. Anyways, but I did that yesterday. And one of those things to be thinking about with hobbies and things, like what are your hobbies? Do your hobbies make you feel better? Do your hobbies push you ahead? All of that kind of stuff. Or is your hobby drinking beer and binge watching Netflix? It's kind of one of those things to consider. Races are easy to get into. If you want to do a race, you just sign up for a race and you show up. Again, especially for 5Ks, a lot of people actually walk 5Ks. So some of you people might be like, well, Eli, running's not that easy. It's like, okay, calm down. You don't even have to run. You just have to walk. You have to walk. Tell me how walking's not that easy. Again, don't get me wrong, you're in a wheelchair, fine. You see some people in wheelchairs too. But anyways, you go, you show up, you're around people, you get some fresh air, you get to see some things you might not normally see. It's a good thing. And then you can set goals. So yesterday I did the 10K, so that's 6 miles. Last time I did it was like a year or two ago. It must have been 2 years ago. Last time I did it, oh my God, I was huffing and puffing. I was like, when the hell is this thing gonna be over? And yesterday I did it, and I was like, la 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 la, and then it was over. I was like, darn. Can you throw in another 4 miles for me? I don't need a whole half marathon here, but if we just stretch this out to 10 miles, that would be quite lovely for a Sunday. So anyways, some things to think about in the real world. If you don't know what I care about Silicon Dojo. Silicon Dojo. What if we believed in empowering other human beings to make our own lives better? That's kind of the idea. Anyways, it's free tech education. We have an upcoming teacher question and answer session again on this Friday, February 21st. So we do Zoom calls, and you can ask me questions. We put the old videos there and old classes here. We have self-study programs. We have a Python self-study program and a Bottle Web App Framework self-study program. The SQL, Structured Query Language, should be done. Well, it'll be done this week. It has to be done this week. Should be done the next day or so. Anyways, and then we have office hours. So tech coaching, 30 minutes every Monday from 1 to 5. I open myself up to answering people's questions. So that's fully stocked. So I will be doing that later today. But that exists. But anyways, now we have to get into the super serious commentary. Oh, this feels so good. This feels so good. You know how nice it is not to talk about Trump? Nothing that I'm going to talk about today has a damn thing to do with Trump. Feels nice. Unfortunately, it's not going to get clicks. It's not going to get clicks. We're going to talk about processors. We're going to talk about the business of silicon. And we're going to talk about things that are very significant for your career and your entire profession. And I'm probably going to get 20 views. Because Trump is not in the title. I should probably just do the title and just like, period, Trump. Maybe that's how I get some views on this. Anyways, I think this is interesting. This is very interesting, and I think this is very significant. This is one of those, might be a pivot point for how systems architecture is currently done. So ARM's share rise on report that Meta will buy its first chip. So this is exciting. You may not understand why it's exciting, but I swear to you it is exciting. So ARM, right? ARM is a British company, a publicly traded company now. That basically designs the architectures for their processors. Now, the interesting thing about ARM is up until now, apparently, they didn't actually build any of their processors, right? So there's something called fabs. So TSMC has fabs, Intel has fabs, other companies have fabs. I guess NVIDIA doesn't have fabs. They use TSMCs. Anyways, but these things called fabs, and so the fabs are what actually create the processors. And the interesting thing with ARM is ARM doesn't own any fabs, nor do they use other people's fabs in order to create their own processors that they sell. What they sell is licensing. So their idea, and that's one of the reasons they're really taken off, one of the reasons NVIDIA uses them, and Apple is a big one to use them, and most of the smartphones use them, is basically what they do is they design the architecture for ARM processors. And it's kind of like an open-ish, it's not open-ish, it's a configurable architecture. So the idea being is if you're a company like Apple, you can't fuck with it. But if you're like Apple and you got billions and billions of dollars, the idea is it's like, oh, okay, we want to use 6 of these, processing units and 6 or 4 of these, neural units and all that kind of stuff. And then they can all slap that together to create their own processor. So one of the reasons that Macs work relatively well for the things that they're designed for is that Apple can license ARM's architecture to specifically design chips to perform the functions they expect their computers to do. One of the big problems that we had up until as a real revolution with ARM processors over about the past decade is that CPUs were designed basically to do anything. Right, and so that's one of the things in life. Again, with any product at all, if a product is designed to solve all problems, it may solve all problems, but it will generally do it not really well. Right? You can either solve a specific problem incredibly well, or a whole bunch of different problems, adequately. And that was the thing with, especially like with Intel processors and AMD processors, is that they were CPUs, and they were designed to go into any type of computer. So if you have a desktop computer, you get an Intel. If you get a server, you get an Intel. You have a VoIP system, you get an Intel. You got a digital surveillance system, you got an Intel. You do some kind of database system, you're going for Intel again, right? So the exact same processor could be used on anything from a desktop computer to a database server to a gaming rig, basically, essentially the exact same architecture. Again, there is Xeon and the different levels of Intel or whatever. So there are different levels, right? Xeon was supposed to be for servers, that type of deal. But basically, it was the same architecture, right? It was the difference between buying a Ford and a Mercury. Does Mercury still exist? Anyways, There's Fords, Fords. There used to be something called Mercury. Mercury basically was a Ford. It was just a nicer model of a Ford, that type of deal. And so again, a Xeon processor is an Intel processor, i9 whatever. It's just a nicer version of that, right? And so, anyways, one of the interesting things, again, with the revolution with ARM processors, is that more and more companies could design processors specifically for the tasks that they had in mind for whatever device it is, right? And ARM has really taken off over the past number of years because Intel totally dropped the ball on smartphones. So basically, when smartphones came out, Intel didn't care. And again, smartphones didn't come out with the iPhone. iPhones were not the first smartphone by a long damn shot. So fucking long, right? We had Blackberries before that. Again, my favorite phone was something called it was a Motorola. Fuck, forget what it's called now. It's been that long. Motorola Q. There's a Motorola Q. Anyways, it had Windows CE on it or something. There was something called Windows CE. Windows actually had a mobile operating system before they had mobile phones. Before that died. Anyways, right? Anyways, but Intel didn't care. They were making so much money off of Xeon servers, Xeon chips, and all that kind of stuff. They just dropped the ball. The interesting thing was ARM was basically a low power, required less electricity to run the computers. So for smartphones, that was a great thing. So they got in with the smartphone market, and they just kept getting better and better and better and better and better and better and better. And now ARM is doing well, and Intel might be getting sold for scrap. That's interesting. Hey, that's how we can throw Trump into this. We'll talk about that probably in tomorrow's video. Hey, isn't it interesting with America First that Intel is being split up and essentially sold to TSMC? Wait a minute. America First, and yet Intel's fabs are going to be handed over to Taiwan. I do not understand the concept of America First. Anyways, story for another day. So, anyways, ARM is taking off. Intel is doing whatever the fuck Intel is doing. I don't know at this point. So that's the thing. And so basically they've been able to take off because one of the ideas is that they're kind of like Switzerland, right? That they don't really compete with anybody. They don't really compete with Apple chips. They don't really compete with Samsung or anything like that. They design the architecture and let other people do it. The curious thing now is, again, one of the issues with all of these companies is they've got to get bigger, 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 bigger. This is actually a true problem with modern capitalism where you can never be big enough. You can never just take your profit and go the fuck home. You've always got to get bigger, regardless of how well that may do for your business prospects in the future. Again, and that's the issue that we see with so many of these companies, where they start getting into so many like weird side businesses and start competing on absolutely bizarre things. So anyways, ARM, again, publicly traded company, they need to find more and more profit. So what they're going to do now is they are going to start producing their own processors. And Meta seems to be the first company that's willing to buy it. So from CNBC, ARM shares rise on the report that Meta will buy its first chip. ARM shares rose 6% after a Thursday report that it was developing its own chip and that it had secured Meta as one of its first customers. The Financial Times report indicates that ARM is developing a new product that will compete with many of its customers. The semiconductor company currently licenses technology called an instruction set, as well as more complicated core designs to its customers so they can build their own chips. ARM has historically been known as the Switzerland of chip technology firms, a reputation it received by dealing neutrally with competing chip makers. It counts Apple, Google, Nvidia, Amazon, Microsoft, Qualcomm, and Intel as customers. Meta is spending as much as $65 billion this year on capital expenditures for artificial intelligence. While much of the spending is on Nvidia's based systems, Meta has also purchased other chips, including AMD's and is said to be developing its own chip internally. ARM's chip will be a central processor for servers, according to the report, not the kind of graphics processor typically used for the heaviest AI workloads. Let's see here. Renee Haas, ARM's CEO, cited billions of dollars in planned data center spending from Google for 75 billion, Microsoft for 80 billion, and Meta for 60 billion as an opportunity for ARM earlier this month. Quote, no one is pulling back, Haas said earlier this month on an earnings call. ARM is also a technology partner to the Stargate initiative, which plans to spend as much as 500 billion building AI infrastructure for OpenAI. So I think this is an interesting thing because, again, with all these tech companies, they've got to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now that ARM is a real player, now that ARM is a trusted player, ARM is going to start producing its own processors. Now, this could be good. What? Yes, this could. Probably not going to be. Anyways, this could be good. This could be very, 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 very good. Basically, the idea here being that if ARM starts producing their own processors, that it gives them more skin in the game to start producing better processors, right? One of the issues, again, if you create your technology and then you just license it out to other people, you don't necessarily you might not have the most vested interest in making sure everything is absolutely perfect, right? So by having them actually creating the processors themselves and selling the processors themselves, that might be a good way for them to essentially eat their own dog food. The other thing too is depending on what market they're going after, it might be good that for them and the people that license their technology, if essentially they're going after the lowest value on the I don't know, the CPU pyramid of food, right? So again, if they're just going after the really just almost like, the car, the stuff for cars, again, just general CPU type stuff, the other quote unquote competitors might not necessarily see this as a bad thing. And if ARM is pushing into this may improve the brand recognition for ARM processors. So basically, if they can prove that ARM processors are inexpensive, but they're highly effective and they're stable for a lot of this just really commodity task at this point, right? That is a brand value for when Apple is selling their ARM processors and Samsung is selling their ARM processors. It's like, look, if it's good enough for Meta to put tens of billions of dollars of these processors into their data centers, then it's good enough for your phones, right? Those are the kinds of things that this might be good for. I think it might end up being a damn disaster though. And the reason is because now ARM is literally competing with the people that license their technology. And now the question then has to be, what happens to things like intellectual property, right? So this is a big deal like with Amazon, right? Amazon is the pure bastard company of the modern world where they compete with their own vendors, right? That's one of the issues a lot of vendors have with Amazon, selling things on Amazon, is Amazon gets all the stats. So Amazon sees the products that are selling really well, gets to understand what products are selling really well, and then literally creates their own competitor brands to go after the vendors that are using their own marketplace, which is absolutely insane. But it's true, right? So literally by going on Amazon, like if you are a vendor and you go on Amazon, you really do need to be so small that you're not seen as a good profit center for Amazon. Because if Amazon sees you as a good profit center, they will literally try to destroy you, which is a hell of a thing. And so an interesting thing with this, right? Again, think about this with a lot of these big tech companies. So you got the Googles of the world and the Apples of the world and that type of thing. They're spending a tremendous amount of money on research and development and those types of deals. And so if they're working with ARM, right? If they're working with ARM and ARM doesn't produce any chips, it's a lot easier to be kind of open and a little freer with information so that you can figure out how things can work better, right? You're working together. You do not see ARM as a competitor. The issue then becomes if ARM now truly is going to be your competitor, how comfortable are Apple and Google and the rest of these companies literally handing over their research and development information to a company that is now actually going to be their competitor. And again, one of the big things to ask with this is, where does it end, right? You might say, well, Eli, this is just for CPUs. This is just for CPU commodity CPUs. Nobody gives a damn about, right? Apple doesn't give a damn about commodity server CPUs, so it doesn't matter. But if this is the first shot across the bow, today it's commodity CPUs. Tomorrow it's commodity smartphone CPUs. The day after it's something else. The day after it's something else. The day after it's something else. And then all of a sudden, again, since they own their licensing, as we've seen so many times with other tech companies, what happens when they just change their licensing? Right? Oh, Apple or oh, Google. Yeah, you know how you've been buying our licensing for the past decade and it's been great? Yeah, well, here's the deal. A year from now, you have to buy our processors. Or a year from now, you have to start playing more and more and more by our particular game. And again, as ARM has that leverage, I think there's going to be more and more push for them to use that leverage. Again, in the technology world right now, again, I talk about the syphilitic brain, right? The syphilitic brain of Silicon Valley and the syphilitic brain of all these investors, right? They're literally mining the foundations of our society so that they can get a few flakes of gold and drive around in cool cars. They're like, wow, look at how amazing we are. We're masters of the universe. And it's like, yeah, because nobody else would be stupid enough to fucking mine the foundations of their own society in order to get a couple of dollars of wealth for a few fucking minutes. But anyways, when you're big tech, when you're big tech, doesn't mean you think that far into the future. And so one of the issues with this is, again, what we've seen with any technology company that gets leverage is they use it, and they use it in shockingly shitty ways. Again, we see that with Meta, right? Back when it was Facebook. So back in the day, you could buy advertising so that your pages could get likes. So back in the day with Everyman IT. So my original thing with content was Everyman IT. Anyways, I paid for advertising on Facebook, got up to like 30,000 likes on Facebook so that people could, so they liked it. So they had to, I advertised them to show them I existed. Then they liked it. They made that decision. And then Facebook decided, Mark Zuckerberg decided, wait a minute, why are we giving you these views? And so even after people liked my page, I then was supposed to start paying for advertising towards the people that liked my page in order for them to see it. Right? But I already paid for the advertising for them to see it in the first place. But it doesn't matter. Mark Zuckerberg always needs more money. That's a syphilitic brain. More, 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 more. They don't care, right? Again, we see that with companies like Apple right now, just being complete and utter bastards with their app store. Oh, you paid $1,300 for an iPhone? Well, guess what? That's not enough money for Tim Cook, right? He needs the money dripping out of his lips. And so that's why they charge 30%. Again, for any app that's going to be sold on the iOS store, needs 30% off the top. Recurring, they need their cut there. Because although you spend $3,000 on a computer, although you spend $1,400 on a phone, Tim Cook needs more money, right? Again, not 5% or something like that. They take as much as they can possibly get. And we see this from tech company time and time and time again. They are just deranged. And so the issue that you see with this deranged psychological environment of the tech industry now is you see a company like ARM now going to the path of producing processors. So one of the things you can think about, like with the walls, we talk about like walls, we talk about moats. And again, even before, right? Apple and ARM are working together. That's dangerous, right? When you deal with a syphilitic, you don't know what's going to happen to you. But you got this moat. You got this moat. Maybe the syphilis won't jump the moat, right? Anyway, so you're working back and forth. You still got to be cautious because, again, like ARM is also working with Google and ARM is also working with Samsung. So you don't want to give away too much information, but you feel like you have this moat. Well, now all of a sudden, again, the investors, they need more money. They need more money. And so now that moat disappears. Now they're directly competing with their customers that are actually getting the chips manufactured. And the question is if they're willing to then destroy this particular mode, how long before they inch forward a little bit more, and 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 inch forward a little bit more, because they always fucking need more. And then it's interesting to then consider what is the tech landscape going to look like past that. Again, I was at RISC-V, so there's a RISC. There's a RISC processor. It's a completely open source processor. The entire thing is open source, right, for the processor. And it's janky as hell. Janky as hell. Eli, when are you going to do a class on RISC-V? Never. That is a janky potato. I will teach you how to optimize your potato. But man, that potato's just janky. Throw that thing out, right? Anyways, it's an open source processor initiative. Again, God bless them. God bless them. But it's janky. Everybody I've seen working with those things, they're like, yeah, it works. Works. And so again, the curious thing to be thinking about, like with technology, is a lot of times these products come out, and you're like, well, why? Who the hell cares? And then things occur in the larger macro business environment, right? Again, the lawyers get in and the marketers get in, right? It's not the technology itself. It's how the technology is being implemented and sold. And so the curious thing here is with ARM going down this route, this may be a massive opening for the RISC-V processors. And then the curious thing becomes is if companies become more and more concerned about using ARM and investors ever more greedy just need to shove that money down their gullet, start trying to use ever more leverage to pump money out of these companies, then is that going to push more companies to RISC-V? And then what does that look at from like a support perspective? Again, we see that big thing like with going from, I've got Macs, right? So going from the Intel CPUs to the ARM CPUs. It's not a seamless process. Even now, shit doesn't work necessarily right. Again, Intel Macs, great. Again, power consumption sucked. A few things sucked with them. But for peripherals and all that kind of stuff, everything worked fine. One of the things that's interesting, even now, even in 2025, is with these ARM processor Macs, there are still things that are incredibly janky, right? And so the curious thing is think about it going forward. If you have more companies that decide to hop onto different CPU architectures and away from ARM, what is that going to look like from like a design perspective? Again, it's things like, you don't even think about it, like with Linux, right? Linux is just an operating system. But running Linux on x86 is different than running Linux on ARM, will be different than running Linux on RISC-V. Like even things like SDK, software development kits. So like with Azure, right? So I talked about this before. There's something called Azure Cognitive Services. It used to be called Azure Cognitive Services. And the curious thing with it is that you could use, so I was using voice services. And so you could use Python with Azure's voice services. You could use Linux with Azure's voice services. It was like you could use ARM with Azure's voice services, but it was this weird mishmash. So I could get everything working. So if I had a Linux box using an x86 architecture, everything worked fine. Everything worked fine. If I use a Linux box using a Raspberry Pi, so an ARM architecture, everything went to hell. And what you found in the fine print is it was like Python with Azure on Linux on x86 works. Azure on Linux on ARM with C# works. But Python with Linux on ARM with Azure doesn't work. You know, some really quirky ass stuff. Again, for stuff that you're not necessarily thinking will be a big issue. So that'll be kind of the curious thing with this to see how this moves forward. And like, not tomorrow, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's not going to matter. But we start to see like on the 5-year time horizon how these technology companies start looking at their processors and where things go. Again, it'll be also curious to see if more and more companies are going to start designing their own processors and whether or not they'll even use the ARM architecture. So OpenAI right now, they're talking about producing their own processors. Meta is talking about producing their own processors. And so what's curious about this is, again, I get a lot of questions about how to work for FANG. I don't know. I've never worked for FANG. I don't want to work for FANG. FANG, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google. Why the fuck would I want to work for FANG? That sounds like shit. That sounds like shit. FANG was cool 10 years ago. You know when I wanted to have worked for FANG? Probably 20 years ago. But anyways, FANG nowadays looks like crap. But something to think about. What we see with these really large tech companies is that they seem to be designing more and more of their own systems and more of their own architecture. And so a curious question starts to come about of what happens when their technology stacks start to become so siloed that they're not necessarily knowledge in them isn't necessarily that relevant for doing work at other companies. So again, like when I started, there's something called convergence. There's a concept called convergence 20 years ago, and that's when everything moved over to TCP/IPv4 and Ethernet standard, right? Basically, before that, most technology was siloed. So digital surveillance systems used something called Siamese cable. Telephone systems, digital and analog telephone systems use something called Cat3 cable, 66 blocks, 110 blocks, that type of deal. Intercom systems use their own technology, right? Everything was its own siloed world. So if you were a telecom administrator, you may be amazing, but you didn't know shit about Cisco. And I have stories about that, right? You literally didn't know how IP routing worked, right? If you knew surveillance systems, you didn't necessarily know telephone systems or any of that kind of thing. What's been interesting, again, we've been in this paradigm for about 20 years of this converged environment where everything works on the same standards, right? Basically, everything works on IPv4. Everything uses CPU, Intel or x86 or even now ARM CPUs. Again, Linux and Windows. And so basically, if you go and work for a hospital and you learn how the hospital systems work, you can probably go work for a construction company in their technology division, or go work for a factory in their technology division, because it's all IPv4, it's all routers, it's all switches, it's all access points, it's all servers, right? MySQL is MySQL, SQL is SQL, whole 9 yards. What becomes interesting, though, with more and more of these big tech players, they seem to be trying to re-silo their tech stacks, right? So they're going to start using more and more of their own, if not proprietary. So proprietary means nobody else can use it. If not necessarily proprietary, at least technology that nobody else is using, right? This is our stack. That over there is somebody else's stack. And so it'll be interesting to take a look at is if you want to go start working for these big players, are you going to have to start to understand and know architectures that may not be what's in your Net Plus book or your A Plus book or your MCSE test or whatever else, that they're literally running purely in their own environments, and their environments don't necessarily look like other people's environments. And so be curious, like as tech professionals, what that looks like for us going forward and how all this works out. Because that was supposed to be the idea, right? The idea for my generation, Gen X, is we're supposed to be opening everything, right? Open standards, SMTP, RSS, XML, right? Everything was supposed to be open. But then we get these syphilitic bastards, right? And it's about closing down, right? Instead of having SMTP, we have Facebook. Instead of RSS, we have Twitter. Instead of RTMP, we have YouTube. Instead of SIP, we have our own communication, WhatsApp or whatever else, right? Everything that was trying to be opened up, right? These bastards have tried to close down and try to own. They want monopolistic control over this so they can suck every dime out of you that they think they can get. So it's curious, right? If we keep this particular mindset going forward, what does that look like for the tech stacks for these major corporations? And where, as professionals, do we fit into this crap show? I don't know. I don't know. Come on, Gen Alpha. Come on, Gen Alpha. Maybe you can be like us. It's like every couple of generations. That's what they say with like generations kind of like repeat themselves. Like you have one generation that looks like a lot like a different generation. So I don't know, maybe after the millennials or whatever, maybe the alphas or the betas. We got the beta generation. I'm I'm pinning all of my hopes on the beta generation to come in. Be like, hey, can we just actually open stuff up? Can we make the world a better place? Can we not just reinforce the foundations of our societies, but can we actually structurally make things so we can really go into the future? Because the current set of bastards are just, oh, I don't know what the hell they're doing. So, anyways, what do you think about this? What do you think about ARM producing their own processors? They're probably going to be producing it through TSMC. So, at this point, I don't know if they have fabs or not. But right now, going through TSMC. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that's a boon for the technology world? This will just push things forward. They'll go after the very low end commodity, or are all of their partners now literally competitors, as we've seen happen so much in the technology world? And then what happens, right? Once those investors, once the ARM investors know they now have Tim Cook by the nutsack, how hard do you think they're going to squeeze? And then what does that environment look like? I don't know. Put your thoughts. Put your thoughts down below. Anyways, with that, I need to finish the sequel series, and I'm doing those meetings today. I think I got five. I got like 5 meetings scheduled for today, so hopefully those will go well. So, anyways, see y'all later.